Journal entry. Heartsick. Sylvia and I had lunch, which we finished some time ago. I had invited her because I needed to talk. Now she just sat and patiently waited while I quietly gathered my thoughts. He's going on a date tonight. Another date that you encouraged him to go on, Sylvia stated. His 6th or 7th in 3 years, if I'm remembering correctly. I silently nodded, my insides twisting up in knots. You're not happy about him dating, are you? You never have been. When I said nothing, she asked, What about you? When is the last time you went out with someone? I can't remember. I do. It was 6 months ago. In the past 3 years, you have dated even less than he has. Why is that? I needed to answer her. I desperately needed to confide in her and share what I had carried inside for 3 long years, but I had no clue how to even begin. And what would she think when I did speak the words that my heart had considered forbidden to utter for so long? Sylvia's wise eyes stared into mine, and then I knew she knew. When did you begin to fall in love with him? With her earnest question, the floodgates of my mind opened and my thoughts slowly tumbled through my lips. I loved Angelo DeLuca more than words could possibly express. I couldn't really pinpoint when I knew for sure, but looking back, I realized my feelings for him began to change even before the cruise. They just didn't start to materialize until then. Wiping away the tears that came unbidden, I remembered wondering if something was wrong with me. And even though I had tried to shake it off and go on pretending things were normal, I couldn't. For me, everything was changing. I was changing, though it took me a while to realize what was happening to me. Many times during the cruise, I had caught myself staring at Angelo when he wasn't looking. Whenever he stood on deck, looking out over the ocean, I found myself watching the breeze tousle his dark hair, marveling at the vividness of his blue eyes and the way his tan skin looked in the sun. I had felt an unfamiliar warmth curl in my stomach on the morning we docked in St. Martin's when he opened the door and let me in before he'd even put his shirt on. The muscles of his arms and chest were lean and chiseled. I had seen him without a shirt plenty of times before, and had spent time swimming on the beach with him shirtless. But that day, I was seeing him in a different light. Angelo looked like an untouchable god. He was so handsome. He always had been, but only then did I truly admit to myself I was attracted to the man that raised me, the man who had cared for me for most of my life. Each and every day after that trip, my feelings continued to grow until I couldn't deny them any longer. I deeply loved him. I may have been young, but my heart had known what it wanted. Over the years, that want had become a need, one that was so strong I could barely conceal it, and I was scared to death of him finding out. I don't know what to do, I finally said. He still sees me as a child, and probably always will. One day, he will find someone else. He will fall in love and marry again, and I don't know if I can handle that. Yes, he will marry again one day, Sylvia said, and no, you wouldn't be able to handle that. But you won't have to. What do you mean? Sylvia looked at me intently. Angelo doesn't think of you as a child anymore, Katia. He sees you as a woman, a very beautiful woman. I can't say what's going on inside his heart, but think about this. The only reason he dates, when he does date, is because you encourage him. If you didn't, I don't think he would go out at all. He would much rather be home with you. I shook my head, unable to believe that. Angelo and I have always been close, and I knew he loved me, but it was the love of a caretaker. Think about it, Katia. Think long and hard about it. I allowed myself to think about the few dates Angelo had gone on and how generic they were. Whenever he came home, I was waiting. I always had been. The secret warmth I felt when he walked through the door was always mixed with an ache that grew more acute each time. I would immediately ask him how his date went. Our conversations always went the same way. I would ask, "How was your date?" He would answer, "It was all right." Next, I'd ask, "What did you do?" Then he would tell me. Usually it was dinner and a movie. I always tried to smile brightly, but it was not my real smile. It was my masking smile. There were secrets behind my smile he had yet to glimpse, and I would never let him discover what they were. After he would tell me about his date, we would pop some popcorn and play a game or watch television, or I would fall asleep against his shoulder. During the past year, whenever this happened, I would wake up to his arms around me and his lips pressed against my brow, and the warmth spreading through me was instant. It took everything to keep from sighing audibly. During those moments, the want and emotional need was so tangible, I would end up crying myself to sleep. As I thought back on the 3 dates I had over the past year, something occurred to me. Whenever I left, his eyes always held something I couldn't discern. They almost seemed sad, and when I returned, his reaction was the same as mine when I waited for him. Could he? Evidently, Sylvia was a mind reader because she placed her hand over mine and said, "It's time, Katia. It's time for you and Angelo." She smiled. "You're a woman now, and it is time for you to love." "But maybe he won't." "Katia, trust me, it is time, but first you need some time on your own." "What do you mean?" "I have a condo up in Nag's Head. It's yours to use. Get away for a little while and sort it through." As much as it would kill me to be away from Angelo, Sylvia was right. I did need some time. Maybe a couple of months away would be good for me, but what would Angelo think? "So, should I have the on-call housekeeper get the condo ready for you?" I couldn't think about it anymore. I would talk myself out of it. No matter how much it hurt, I needed to do this. "Yes," I finally answered. "I'll leave this weekend." It was a little before midnight when I got home. Angelo was still up, most likely waiting for me and wondering why I wasn't there when he got back from his date. I felt bad about that. When I'd called him earlier, I only said I had a few more errands to run and I would see him later. I hadn't said how much later, and I felt guilty for not being there. I met him in the upstairs hallway. We stood looking at each other, neither of us seeming to know what to say. I was afraid to say what I needed to say. Maybe tomorrow I would tell him, when I could think it over a little more. After staring into his eyes a moment, I sensed a change, one that made my heart pound. Why was he looking at me that way, I wondered. He finally spoke first. "I talked to Sylvia." "Oh, so that's why." Closing my eyes, I turned away from him. I could feel myself trembling. Sylvia was supposed to let me tell him. "I had called her earlier," he said, "because I needed to talk." I felt him slowly move closer. He gently took my shoulders in his hands, turning me around. He lifted my chin, urging me to look at him, and I fought back the tears pressing. He pressed his lips to my closed lids and then my cheeks, gently kissing the tears away. At the touch of his warm mouth against my skin, I shuddered and exhaled. When he finally spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion, his blue eyes misty. "Katia, Dolcezza, I understand why you must leave. Take all the time you need, but know I will be here waiting for you." He drew me into his arms then, and I melted in against him. His arms were so warm, his embrace more intoxicating than ever before. I could feel his heart pounding like mad, and it matched the beat of my own. I moved my hands up his taut, muscular back and held him tighter. Neither of us spoke again. We simply stood there, locked in an emotional embrace. I never wanted him to let me go. I could stay wrapped in his arms this way forever.